Good morning. You're listening to Inspiration and Information with Jen Julius. And this morning I have Lorraine Segal here in the studio with me. And we're going to be sharing some really great information with you today. Our topic is making a clean getaway, love, clarity, and freedom from the past. Lorraine, I would love to hear a little bit about your background and what brought you into this work. And maybe you can give us a little synopsis of all the great points we're going to hit on today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me to be here today, Jen. I'm just happy to be here with you in your beautiful studio in Occidental and to share this material that I love so much.
And it's so important, too.
Oh, to me and to the world,
Yes.
really.
Yes.
Yes. So I'm telling you about myself. I'll tell you my professional credentials, and then I want to just talk about my journey and my path and how I got here.
Perfect.
I was a tenured professor at a community college for many years, until I uncovered my true passion to help people with communication and conflict and letting go of resentments. And I am a certified conflict management coach, and I have a certificate in conflict resolution. And I also teach at Sonoma State University in the conflict resolution program there, and at St. Joseph's Health Life Learning Center, CEU classes for the nurses. And, I really feel like everything I've ever done in my entire life brought me here. And because the work I've done truly comes out of my personal and professional journey. I grew up in a family, it wasn't I don't have those horrific war stories that some people have about the horrors and traumas of their family. But my parents couldn't give my sister and me what they didn't know.
Right.
And so I grew up with, a lot of misunderstandings and messages that didn't serve me well as I got older. I learned a lot about holding grudges and resentments and nothing about letting go of them. I learned that I was supposed to be perfect, but I could never measure up. So I had a lot of shame and feelings of not being good enough and paralyzing procrastination because I so wanted to be perfect that I was afraid of doing anything. And so, as you can imagine, this wasn't really a good basis to be a happy adult.
Right.
And
right.
so I went looking, searching for, it was my own personal spiritual quest of how I could be happier. And I found a lot that contributed to the journey. One was, kind of being born again into the goddess, and 12-step and, therapy and all kinds of things. And a big piece of it was learning that I had to let go of resentments, let go of regrets, forgive myself and others in order to be happy. And I worked really hard at looking at what my part is and being willing to let go and find gentleness for myself and others. And when I did it, it was as if 1,000 pounds of psychic weight had been relieved. Yeah. And it felt so good that I've been doing it ever since. And so that's one really important strand for me that totally came out of my own journey to be happy and live a good life. And I used to teach English as a second language at a community college, and I liked it, and I learned a lot. And because I was a head of a department, I had lots of opportunities to create projects and, put on events and things. But the school I was at, along with many schools, unfortunately, was utterly toxic and dysfunctional. And there was tons of conflict and backstabbing and meanness. And I, as a change agent, someone who was progressive and wanting change, was a target of people's hostility. And it was awful at the time. But out of it came another question, which was, there's got to be a better way to deal with conflict
right.
and disagreements. And so I went back to school and started studying conflict resolution, eventually left that job, and found my true purpose, which is about helping people communicate and let go of conflict and navigate their way to a better life.
Yeah.
And so after I got my certificate, I started teaching at Sonoma State and coaching people privately. And what happened then is I realized that the communication skills were great. And the conflict resolution skills that I was teaching people were great. But they all needed forgiveness work and letting go of resentments. So I started teaching and coaching people with that. And then just recently, I realized that so much of what people are holding on to in terms of resentments and regrets and everything relates to their inner child. We all have these little children inside us who are very much alive and are still operating off of old messages. And one of the big themes that started coming through to me from all of these different aspects, the forgiveness, the conflict resolution, the communication, and the inner child, is the whole idea about the stories that we tell.
Right.
Our stuck stories. Human beings make meaning by telling stories. Mm-hmm. It is so natural and so human. But we can get stuck in stories. And the stories can be about what happened to us in the past. The stories can be about who we were and who we are now. The stories can be about what people did to us. And the stories can be about people in our lives now. And they feel absolutely true and real and compelling. And often they're not, because they know through studying memory that we remember the story rather than the actual events. Mm-hmm. And two people in the same dispute or the same family have different stories. And so a lot of the work that I'm doing with people is to very gently and compassionately look at the stories and look at the places where we're stuck, where there's a more benevolent interpretation of the story. And I guess the big picture is the story we tell ourselves at the fundamental level is it a hostile universe? Or is it a benevolent universe? And a lot of my own work and the work I do with clients is helping them shift from the hostile, mean story about their lives and the universe to opening to love and forgiveness and hope and change.
Yeah. And that is such an easy task, right? I'm so glad that you approached me with this topic, because I think that I also believe with the super intense connection of our emotional state and our physical state. And I know from a lot of the research I've done around our mind-body connection and the manifestation of disease, how much resentment and anger can really manifest in the body as diseases and disorders. Oh. And so I think that understanding and being able to look at this topic today is so crucial in not only feeling better, but really helping shift our body and our entire state of being on an emotional, spiritual, and physical level.
Absolutely. And I've done presentations at integrative health clinics where people are dealing with chronic pain and chronic illness. Yeah. There's a lot of research that shows that, telling a better story, letting go of resentments and regrets, having a more hopeful and positive view absolutely affects pain, absolutely affects illness, and holding resentments truly makes people sick. Yeah. There's a quote I love about it that directly relates, which is, resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Yeah. Yeah. And that bitterness, that resentment, it so impacts our spirits, our bodies, our emotions. Yes, You're so right. Yeah.
So, well then let's dive in. Let's get started. Where do you want to start with this huge topic? Because it's a big one and there's a lot of directions that we could go, but I really want to focus in and give people some tools today. And I know that's what we're ready for. So.
Absolutely. Well, I want to talk a little bit about the stuck story and what that means. And I also want to talk about, what you can do to view your past with more clarity and compassion, how you can begin to let go of resentments and regrets, and how you can how unsticking the story can help you access tools to communicate with people better right now. Impossible people, as I like to call them, who are in your life now.
People who are a pain in the neck?
Yes, and other parts of the body.
Let's do it.
Yes. Okay. So let me just say a little bit about we get stuck in our stories. I've got, if we were doing visuals, I'd have a picture of Laurel and Hardy, because there's a line from one of their movies, and they say, "That's our story, and we're stuck with it."
Oh, perfect.
And it's actually not true, that we don't have to stay with the stuck stories. And when you're able to shift it, as I said earlier, your attitude towards yourself, your attitude towards life, and your relationships will shift.
Yeah.
And it can shift the past, the present, and the future, all of them. So how do we do this? The first thing is just understanding that you may have a stuck story. Because most of the times these are unconscious. It just feels like the truth or reality. So if we open our minds a little bit and recognize, okay, this is the story that I'm telling myself, but there may be others and about it. And, because stuck stories are full of dangers to us, resentments and regrets, victims and villains. And when we can let go, it shifts things. For example, this just happened yesterday. I had have to have an unexpected conversation with someone that affects my clients and my work and everything. And so I was calling a friend to get help, to talk about it. And as I was telling her about it, she said to me, "It sounds like you're making a lot of assumptions about what's going to happen, and that you're still holding a resentment towards these people you need to let go of." And I said, "I teach this stuff, and you're right. I am making assumptions that the disaster is going to happen, and I am still holding a resentment, even though I've done all this work." And I laughed, and she said, "Well, you're just human."
That's the truth.
Yes.
We got to remember that.
So, it is this progress of, I forgot for a minute that I still make up stories all the time, but I recalled faster. And then I was able to say, what if I assume it'll all work out? And we get to negotiate our way through it. So that awareness of knowing it could be a story and starting to ask yourself about it, your own story, can be helpful. And I do about 4 different processes for this with people. One is called the not so merry-go-round of conflict, where you go around a cycle of the
not so merry-go-round.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
That's from a woman named Cindy Noble, who's a great conflict resolution person.
Oh, wow.
And you go around this cycle of looking at it, the underlying assumptions, everything from your perspective and then the other person's perspective. I also, I'll talk about more later about a hot button process that I do. And then part of the stuck story really is about the resentments, that they did this to me. We know that we judge other people by the impact their behavior has on them, and we judge ourselves by our intention. So I know I didn't mean any harm if I say something that accidentally hurt your feelings.
Ooh, okay. Can you explain that one more time?
Yes.
So, okay, we judge people by how?
Okay, so someone does something that hurts us.
Yeah.
Okay. So we judge their behavior based on the impact on us.
Got it.
Oh, what an awful thing they did. They're terrible people,
Got
or
it.
they meant to hurt me,
Right.
or they hate me. Whereas when we do something, we make a mistake and say something hurtful. We say,
Oh, but I didn't mean to.
I didn't mean to. It was just the situation that I lost my temper or whatever.
Impact versus intention.
Yes.
Right? I
Yes.
really appreciate that. And it's something that one of the workshops I teach collaboratively with Stephen Campbell, we talk a lot about perception.
Absolutely.
Right? How perception impacts reality. And
Exactly.
really, reality is our perception to us. So that's so perfect in what you're talking about right now,
Yes.
because the impact that people have is completely based upon the perception and how we interpret it.
Yes. And the assumptions we make. There's I trained as a mediator as well. And in mediation, we talk about the 3 stories. There's our story, their story, and the third story, what someone outside ourselves would see. So this is part of the whole, my theme about stories and sometimes, when I do my hot button work, I often talk about it in cinematic terms. We get triggered. We have a narrative, our story that we're telling about it. And we also have our backstory, about what they did and who the history is and everything. And part of unsticking from the story is saying, what other interpretations could there be? And can I pick a benevolent one? And it even works for simple things. We've all had the experience of driving down the road and someone's going really slowly in front of us and we're in a hurry.
That was me today.
It's so common, isn't it, in human? And so I could tell myself the story, this stupid fool. Why are they driving so slowly? They should get off the road. They're too old there, to be driving or whatever story. Or I could switch stories and say, well, maybe they're looking for an address. Or maybe they don't know the road and they're going slower.
Or maybe they're enjoying the beautiful scenery that we live in.
Exactly.
And you're all, yeah.
And any of those stories can help me sort of back off, feel better in my body.
Yeah.
And not perceive things in that I got to get there, they're in my way kind of thing. So part of it is just that bringing it to conscious awareness, understanding, and a lot of it does have to do with resentments. That is the most toxic kind of story that we hold. Actually, resentments and regrets. If someone did something to us and we're still telling the story over and over and over about it. Or we feel like we made a mistake and we can't forgive ourselves and we're telling this story over and over and over. And that is one of the hallmarks of a stuck story, is that repetition of just, we can't let go of that story. And when we tell ourselves the same story over and over and over, it starts feeling more and more and more true.
Yeah. Well, and it also brings it back to life. I mean, every time that we tell it in the present day, our brain recognizes it as a current event too.
Yes.
It's, even if it was 10 years ago, if you're still telling yourself and experiencing it, your body's noticing on a visceral level, hey, whoa, this is still happening.
Yes.
And it's not.
It's exactly. There's, I listen to these old time AA guys, Joe and Charlie, and they have this thing. They talk about alcoholics, but it's so true for all of us, about a resentment machine. And so they talk about it as in a football, when someone runs into someone else and there's this horrible accident and they fall over, and that they can do an instant replay in slow motion of what happened. And what we often do is we replay this over and over and over, and it looks worse and worse. And we do it about resentments and regrets that we have with people. And often, if it's a resentment, every time we replay the story, it's less, we don't look at our part in it. We just look at what they did until at the end, it's just, well, I was just standing there and they came and did this horrible thing to me. So, the forgiveness and letting go, the first part of it is just looking at what is and what happened, and switching from blame to contribution.
Are we gonna explain that a little more? I hope.
Yes.
Because I think one of the challenging things I've noticed in my work with people is that so often the blame game is happening and it's challenging for them to even recognize that it's occurring.
Yes.
I think that we unfortunately have kind of programmed ourselves in this culture to blame others and displace responsibility on things outside of ourselves.
Yes.
And I think that one of the most powerful. In fact, I just got an email from a past client this week, and one of the things she said is just how amazing she's doing now that she's recognized how much of her life is dependent upon the choices she makes.
Yes.
Simple as that.
Absolutely.
And the concept of being able to make a choice in how she responds to everyday situations, how she chooses to move forward, whether it's career-wise, personal-wise, whatever.
Yes.
It's up to us to make these choices on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
And figure out, do I like what's happening? No? Okay. Maybe I can change it.
Yes.
And then recognizing if you don't like what's happening and you're still doing it, you're making a choice to.
Exactly. Yeah. And that is switching from blame to contribution. What am I bringing to the situation?
Perfect.
For example, I worked with a client who was being bullied at work. And when she came to me, she was out on stress leave disability stress leave, because she could not cope with this coworker. And as she explained the situation to me, I said, look, you are being bullied. Ultimately, you might have to leave, because sometimes that's all you can do is walk away. But let's take a look at, even though she's doing these horrible things, what might you be contributing to the situation? So we went really slowly looking at the situations, what happened, what the woman said to her, what she said back. And what we realized is, first, there were some places where she could make different choices.
Yeah.
One was that she could, that the woman would pull her off into an office to harangue her.
Wow.
And gossip about other people, both of which made my client feel sick. And so we actually practiced her saying no and saying, I'm sorry, I'm busy now, I don't have time to go talk to you, and just interrupting the cycle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also, my client was a very nice girl, and so when her coworker would complain about other people in awful terms, she would nod and say, because that's what nice girls do. And so we practiced her switching her behavior to, I don't like to gossip about my coworkers in that way when they're not here. And so those were like
setting boundaries.
Specific, exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing I had her do, which might sound strange, but it's really, I'd have a very spiritual approach to the work I do. I had her pray for the woman, pray for her well-being, pray for her healing. And it was actually, what happened is she went back to work, and it was miraculous. She did this once with the woman of the changing the behaviors, and the woman stopped approaching her in the same way. And now I can't swear it was the prayers, but the woman actually left the job.
Wow.
So it was quite miraculous, And so that's one aspect. And another is that, our culture. I mentioned early in my childhood about how I didn't know anything about letting go of resentments. I knew a lot about holding grudges.
Right.
My mother, bless her soul, told me about 30-year-old grudges and things in the family when I was very young, and so I never learned anything about how you let go. And what I've come to understand is that, people hear the word forgiveness, and I don't actually use the word as much as I used to, because people have a whole set of assumptions just about that word. And so some of the work I do with people is kind of opening up and healing what forgiveness means. Because people think that it's some kind of saintly thing. And really, as Jack Kornfield says, forgiveness is letting go of the hope of a better past.
Oh, okay, I'm going to write that down. So I know other people might want to too. Forgiveness
is letting go of the hope of a better past.
Who says that?
Jack Kornfield, the Buddhist teacher. Yes.
Cornfield?
Yes. F-E-L-D.
Perfect.
Very famous guy. And I'm just going to give you one more quote because
we like
is
quotes.
From Marianne Williamson.
We love her.
Spiritual growth involves giving up the stories of your past so the universe can write a new one.
Okay, again.
Yeah. And so,
people are loving this stuff. Spiritual growth involves giving up the
stories of your past so the universe can write a new one.
Wow.
That really is at the heart of the work that I've done with I was my own first client, really. And then the work
we always are.
Yes.
Yeah. One of the things, as you were talking about that example with your client who, like, what are you contributing, right? And then also let's pray for the person that is bringing some of this really negative, dirty energy to you, right? And it just reminded me so much of the simple concept that hurt people.
Yes.
Right? And we've heard that a million times, but when it was really driven home for me was when I was volunteering in San Quentin and I was helping out with an inmate-led program. They brought that up. They said, hurt people, Jen. And we were really hurt people. And we're not making excuses for our behaviors, but we definitely think that a lot of our pain is what contributed to the crimes we committed.
Absolutely.
And hearing them be able to say that, because they were just such amazing examples of responsibility and accountability for their actions, and just really trying hard to shift the patterns that they'd had and how they could really now be different in society and help out and give back. And hearing that come from them was even more powerful because there's so much truth to it that unfortunately hurt people. We often do what we know.
Yes.
And often I hate to say this, but we give what we have. And if what we have is a lot of pain, we might be given that.
Absolutely.
But that's where choice can come in too.
Yes.
And perhaps we can figure out how to start having more love and compassion and authenticity of who we are and be offering that out to everyone as well.
Absolutely. So. And, with my clients, sometimes we have to work through, they don't deserve forgiveness. They don't deserve my prayers. They don't deserve my love because look at what they did. And I always tell them that forgiveness is a gift we give ourselves. It's really not about the other person. Because when you pray for them, what you're doing is opening your heart to love and compassion. And amazingly, it often impacts them as well. But the real gift is that we're not feeling resentful and hurt and being in the hostile universe I mentioned. Right. I have a great example from a client of mine who came to me. She had been estranged from her mother for about 15 years, so much resentment, almost no contact. And she was perfectly happy in her resentful way for that to continue. But her daughter was getting married. And there was going to be this huge wedding with all these, the rehearsal dinner and all of this. And she was going to have to be around her mother. And she did not know how she was going to do it. So she came to me kind of in a crisis. And so we did a couple things. We strategized how she could direct conversation away from her mother's negativity, how she could give herself breaks, practicing new behaviors. And I also asked her to pray for her mother and her mother's well-being. And she had about 3 weeks before the wedding at the time she came to me. And so she agreed to do that every day. And she texted me from the wedding. She said, "You are not going to believe what happened. My mother is talking to me in a way I've never heard. She's been expressing appreciation to me. She's been telling me how much she loved me." Wow. And it was so healing of their relationship that her mother actually hurt her back while she was back there. And she stayed an extra week to take care of her.
Wow.
And her mother had no idea she was doing this work.
Wow.
But it miraculously healed both of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting how those things can happen.
Yes. Yeah.
So we have a lot more to talk about. We have a visualization we're going to do in the second half. We have a lot more to talk about around communication. And Lorraine and I have been talking about forgiveness and letting go of resentments and regrets. And we were joking how it's just such an easy thing to do. I mean, why do we even need to explain it, right?
Oh, yeah. An hour's too long.
Yeah, I know. Gosh, it's like, get over it. How about that? So we're going to jump back into that because it really is such a big topic. And Lorraine has so much to offer us as far as ideas and tools. So let's jump back in to really talking about resentment resentments, regrets, and how we can start to let go of some of those.
Yeah. Well, we talked, I just want to say a little more about that because we did talk about that some before the break, but just to really understand that letting go of resentments is a gift we're giving ourselves, and that it's not about other people deserving it. Mm-hmm. And it's not about us forgetting what happened. And it doesn't mean when we let go of it, sometimes people think the resentment is protecting them from it happening again. But in fact, we can let go of the resentment and still not be a doormat. Right. You know, we can set boundaries. And some people think there's a rule that you can't forgive someone or let go until they apologize, and it's not true.
Yeah.
And we don't have to forgive someone or let go just because they ask. And you want one more? Can I give you one more quote about forgiveness?
Absolutely.
This is from a book called Courage to Change. Instead of thinking of forgiveness as a gavel, which I pound to pronounce someone not guilty, or an eraser that I use to wipe a board clean, I think of forgiveness as a scissors. I use it to cut the cords of bitterness and resentment and pain that keep me trapped.
Wow.
Yeah. And I love that image of the scissors, although sometimes mine's more like a big gardening shears to cut all these things. Yeah. So we're free. We use it to set ourselves free.
Yeah.
And it is such a huge gift to let go of that. I know. And I've seen it. I know for myself, and I've seen it in my clients. So, So
thank you for sharing that one.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So shall I start talking about communication now?
I would love that. I would love that because I really want to make sure that we give people a couple clear tools.
Absolutely.
So how they can really make this their own today.
Yes. And I just want to say that, this is just such a brief introduction. I mean, I teach a 2-day class just on communication skills in conflict at Sonoma State and, do day-long forgiveness workshops. And so no one's going to absorb everything we're saying in this time.
Don't be too hard on yourself.
Yeah, please. Just let it waft over
after
you.
After the interview, you're like, but I still don't like them. It's a process.
It's okay. Yeah. Just even listening to this is changing you inside.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, this whole idea about the stuck story, we tell ourselves stories about the people who are in our lives now. Yeah. It could be exes, coworkers, bosses and ex-bosses, people in the grocery store. I mean, everywhere we tell ourselves story now. And, I talked about, becoming conscious of your own story. And really recognizing that the other person is the center of their story. And the story they're telling about what happens between you is absolutely not the same. And if you just, becoming aware of that is helpful. And it is possible to, I use the term impossible people because, they'll say to me, how can you communicate with an impossible ex? They're just impossible. I try to talk to them and we end up in a fight. So I always put impossible in quotes because, we're someone else's impossible person and someone who's our impossible person gets along perfectly well with many other people in their lives.
But what if you're the type of person that just does everything right, Lorraine, and you're actually the perfect one?
Oh, I know. It's so hard, isn't it?
I think that sometimes it's hard for people to hear that, it goes back to like, how are you contributing too?
Absolutely.
What ownership do you have in the scenario or the relationship?
Yes, exactly. But I'm gonna just jump into that.
Perfect.
Because one of the things that creates conflict with people and miscommunication in the present is when they just trigger us. And I have a client I'm working with right now, and I in my own journey and how I see it, we all make mistakes. We all contribute to problems because we're human. And this is how human beings learn.
Yeah.
We make mistakes. I said I used to teach ESL. And one of the things I would say to my students the first day of class, because they had so much shame and so much fear of making mistakes. And I would say, you could sit in class all semester and never open your mouth and not write anything. And you know what? You wouldn't make any mistakes. But would you think that you made good use of your time?
Yeah.
And their eyes get big and they say no. Well, I was talking about this with a client and I used the word mistake, and it absolutely triggered her. She went through the roof. It was, it was like she couldn't, in relationship to herself, she was enraged. It was as if she'd gotten out a flaming sword to attack me with. It was intense and overwhelming. Perfect, classic definition of a hot button. Someone says or does something little, and it's like a nuclear reaction going off. And so what I know about those kinds of reactions is they're never just about the moment. They are always about some pattern in the past of things people said to you, other people, or something that happened before. And so with this particular client, she was someone who had a very difficult childhood and always felt like she wasn't good enough, that she could never do things right. And she felt what we uncovered was she felt like if she made a mistake, she was going to be obliterated. She was going to die. And so, of course, she reacted to me saying that. And when we become conscious of those hooks that we have, those hot buttons, then we can, if you say something that triggers me, instead of just me reacting all over you, I can say, whoa, that always triggers me. Yeah. So that's my part.
Yeah.
And there's a process. I can't really explain all the steps, but when we really look at that and where they come from, we can find compassion for ourselves. And this client was challenging, but I could look at her with compassion and remember that it really wasn't about me. It was about her pain. And her history. And we all have that. We're all walking around with little, hot buttons and hooks. So if we can make the decision to communicate respectfully no matter what, and then if we get triggered, we have to somehow... I have one technique I wanted to share with people. It's called the 90-second rule. Okay? Someone says something that absolutely triggers us or sets us off. Well, our first response, first 90 seconds, is the reptile brain, the fight or flight.
Yeah.
That whole system where we're just defending ourselves, we're running away.
Trying to survive.
Yeah. And if we can get through the first 90 seconds, then we don't have to explode all over someone. We can have a more reasoned response. We can remember that they have triggers as well and that their intention may not have been to hurt us. And I teach people just to how you get through the 90 seconds is breathe. And I want to share with you and your listeners just a very quick technique you can do anytime. No one will know you're doing it.
Yeah.
Which when you feel that triggered, and you can practice this so you're more likely to remember and do it more of the time. And just to breathe in and let your belly expand with your breath. And then breathe out and let your belly go soft. And as you're breathing, say, I'm breathing in peace. I'm breathing out peace. And again, breathe in, letting your belly expand. And breathe out, letting your belly get soft. And do it one more time. Breathing out. Breathing in first, that helps. And breathing out. And then bring that soft, gentle energy to your heart. And I can do this with a room full of people who are agitated and it completely shifts the energy. I have a note for myself that I keep up when I know I might be stressed. I just say, breathe. It really helps people make a different choice in that first 90 seconds. So then they can say, what's going on here? Or know that it's not them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's amazing how much just being conscious of our breath can really help us to go into a different state quickly, to switch our energy, to switch where our energy's affecting us, affecting others. Yeah. Thanks for that.
Oh, yeah. You're very welcome. And then once we're in a calmer state, the next thing I talk about with, challenging conversations and impossible people is to find the willingness to listen first. And people say, but why should I listen to them? They don't deserve it. It's about deserving
right,
it. Or
right.
I want them to listen to me.
Yeah.
And the truth is that people are so hungry to be heard.
Yes.
I
really genuinely heard.
Oh, absolutely.
Which is different than just humoring someone. Oh, yeah.
Waiting for your turn.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just to give you an example, one of the things I used to do, I was a mediator at a community mediation place that had a juvenile diversion program. Mm-hmm. And they hired me to do a teen and parent communication workshop as part of that. And they would come in on a Saturday morning. The kids were absolutely sullen, not wanting to be there. And the parents were mad because they're the problem. Why do I have to be here? They were all, and I would have them do, not with each other, but with other parents and other teens, a listening exercise, just 30 seconds. Share something that happened earlier today, a good thing or a difficult thing. And within 2 minutes, it completely shifted the energy in the room because they had the experience of someone really listening to them. And when we give people that gift of listening, they're much more likely to be open to us, to what our concerns are, to what we need. And it also, if we can use the listening, genuine, curious listening, to ask about their story, it gives us so much information to understand, oh, wow, they thought something else was going on. They were in a completely different place around it. And it helps us get more information to shift our story. Yes. Yeah. So if we can listen and ask ourselves, so what might their story be about what's happening?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Just for an example, I have a client who fell in love with this guy and things were going along very well. And then he went away on a business trip and then stopped communicating with her. And she didn't know, and she was sure. She started telling herself a story about, she was sure that it meant he didn't love her anymore and he had lied to her. And it was this whole big story. And instead, she realized, well, he mentioned he's stressed. He's mentioned he's got all these responsibilities. Maybe this has nothing to do with me. And she backed off and just, texted him, I hope everything's going okay. And then, they were able to have a good conversation, and it was the better story. And if she had not gotten curious, just continued to tell herself the bad story, she never would have realized that. So, and the amazing thing is the other person doesn't have to know that you're doing this, because even though there's two people in a communication or in a conflict or disagreement, if one person steps up and changes, it makes a huge difference.
Yes.
And my students and clients will tell me, but why should I be the one? They're the ones who need to change. And I say, well, you're here. You are hearing this.
Yes.
You already know more than they do. So unfortunately, it's not fair, but you have a bigger responsibility to use your power for good and your knowledge and step up and find the compassion and listen.
I give an analogy that I'd like to share really fast about when I used to work with families and now when I work with individuals, that if you think of it as a stream and you throw a boulder in the stream, it's going to completely shift the way that the water flows down the stream, right? Mm. It's similar to when there's a family unit or an individual in a family unit. If one individual in the family or in a couple relationship, whatever, starts to shift things, shift their behavior, shift their attitude, yes. shift their perception of themselves, the relationship, mm-hmm. whatever, it's going to naturally affect the entire system, yes. whether it be a couple, a family, whatever.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's something really important to recognize is just by doing your own work as an individual, it can have a positive impact on so many other people and so many other systems, because that's what we're in. We're in a bunch of systems, yes. whether it's, relationships at work or home or in the community. And I think that also recognizing sometimes if you're the person that kind of has more of, let's say, the experience, the skill set, the knowledge to make a change, then it kind of is your responsibility to step up yes. and, make some of these shifts for yourself and the well-being of the people yes. you care about.
Absolutely. And the rewards are that even if they don't change, you've changed.
Yeah.
And you can have a more peaceful heart.
And people get to choose
joy.
Yeah. People get to choose whether they're going to jump on board with you or not.
Yes.
People can really, if you start shifting things and you're doing better and feeling better and, kind of up leveling the energetic level that you're yes. on, people can join you or they can stay behind. Yes. And unfortunately, that's a choice we make, whether it's consciously or unconsciously.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I have two great examples about this I had a client who, was having tremendous problems with her new adult stepchildren, and they were doing just awful things to her, mm-hmm. Ignoring her. Mm-hmm. Not talking to her, hanging up if she got on the phone. I mean, really, really.
They were adults?
Awful. Yes. Yes,
okay.
with children of their own. Some
okay.
of them. And so what the work I did with her, some of it was looking at her inner child, of how her inner child felt. It was recreating some stuff from her own childhood that she needed to heal. But also, it was, we looked at what could she do to change. She couldn't talk to them about it. They wouldn't even talk to her. But she just decided to act as if the relationship was fine instead of feeling like a victim. So if they said, "Oh, your granddad's here," to the kid, she would just say, "And I'm here too," instead of going into I'm supposed to be invisible place. And they started shifting their behavior to her. She sent me the first family photo that included her in it, which was such a beautiful graphic representation of them on some level, from her praying for them and shifting her behavior, changing things. Now, I just talked to someone, I don't know if they're going to become a client or not, just heartbreaking, got a divorce, and her toxic ex-spouse poisoned the adult children against her. And they cut off all connection. And for years, she was trying to pray and reestablish connection and write them letters. And for 10 years.
Yeah.
And what I said to her was, are you willing to let go?
Yeah.
To pray for them, but to let go, because she was clinging to this vision of what it was going to be like. And the only way for her to find peace and the only way for her to create a beautiful life for herself was to let go. Yeah. So those are two, so you start the work, you never know. With the one client, they absolutely shifted. With this other woman, they could shift, or she could just be free to bless them and live her life and feel the grief, but to go on in a really positive way.
Wow. Yeah. Well, I know time flies when you're having fun. And
so if we're going to do a visualization, we better do it now.
Yeah, about how long is the visualization?
It's just about 5 or 7 minutes. How much time do we have in all?
We could have 10 to 15.
Okay.
So do you want to do that and then we can recap?
Sure.
Does that sound like a good plan?
It'll just, I actually kind of channel so I don't know exactly how long it'll be, but I'll just do it and then we can chat more if there's more time.
Okay. And we can kind of recap for people, because I think we covered a lot of ground and I want to make sure we have a good little summary.
Absolutely.
let
And
people
I've
know.
got some pretty music for
Perfect.
us to play.
Go ahead and pull that up for me. Yay, there it is. All right. So how should people get prepared? Should they, if they're driving, let's not do this.
No. If you're driving, just remember you can replay this later. Please do not enter into this meditation. But you can go ahead and start the music low, and I'll tell them what to do to start.
Perfect.
So if you are in a safe place where you can, I'd like to invite you to settle comfortably but alertly into your chair and close your eyes and just take a few deep breaths, letting go of whatever you were doing before, letting go of the busy day you have ahead, any concerns or worries, to just be here with Jen and me right now. And I want you to see in your mind's eye a beautiful, crystal clear, aqua blue tropical spring, surrounded by ferns and trees, with a waterfall on one side. And as you walk towards the pool, you hear the sound of the birds, and there's a gentle breeze. And you see, walking towards you, a divine, radiant being. You could think of it as God, goddess, a priestess, a spirit guide, someone you deeply love who has passed to the other side. And as you walk up, this being says to you, "Welcome. I'm so glad you're here." And you feel in every fiber of your being their welcome and their love for you. The being says, "I have a gift for you. But first, I would like you to wash your hands in the waterfall." So you follow the path around the edge of the pool, and you see that the path actually goes behind the waterfall. So you walk up behind the waterfall, and it's so beautiful. Rainbows, all the images of the water and the ferns deflected by the light. You hear the crystal sound of the water coming down. It's such a beautiful place. And after you stood there for a moment, taking it in, you reach your hands out to the water and let the water run over the palms of your outstretched hands. You feel the coolness of the water. And then, as you continue holding your hands out, feelings and old griefs start to come up. And you feel them for a moment and feel the water washing them away. That old relationship that you never quite let go of. That incident with a coworker last week. Something a family member said to you when you were just little, and that lodged in your heart like a splinter is being washed away with the water. You remember the old story you tell yourself about not being good enough, about not being able to be successful, and the water just washes it away. You feel the fear of not having or being enough, and then the water rushing over your palms just washes it away. You remember a time someone hurt you so deeply you weren't sure you could ever get over it. And you've been so angry at them ever since. And you feel it for just a moment and let the water wash it away. Oh, it feels so good to empty all that stuff out. The water washes and washes and washes it all away. And you feel empty and peaceful. For now, it is gone, and you are free. You thank the waterfall for this great gift of release and healing, and turn to go down the path. And right there with you is the radiant being, holding out a big fluffy towel and drying your hands. It feels so sweet to be cared for in that way. Then they take your hand and lead you back down the path, still by the side of this beautiful pool and able to see the waterfall. And there you notice for the first time a table with a pitcher and goblet on it. And the being fills up the goblet from the pitcher and hands it to you, saying, "Drink, drink deep." And you start to drink. It tastes like water, yet more like liquid light. It's so delicious and nourishing. And you drink and drink and drink in all that you have longed for. Love and peace. Knowing that you are okay. Knowing that you are loved. Knowing that all will be well. Knowing that you can be and achieve and love and be nourished. And you drink and drink until your whole spirit and your heart are filled with this radiant love. And when you feel completely filled to the brim and can hold no more joy because it's all radiating through you, you put down the goblet and notice to your surprise that it's still full. And the radiant being says, yes, you can fill yourself whenever you need to. There is always love. There is always forgiveness and acceptance. There is always comfort and joy. You thank the being so much for all that you've been given. Thank the pool and the waterfall. And turn to go, knowing that you can come back whenever you want to. And when you're ready, come back to the room or place that you are and the chair that you're sitting in. And when you're ready, open your eyes.
Thank you for that. I hope everyone's able to come back and join us consciously again. It's so interesting how powerful visualizations and meditative techniques can be. You know, and we experience that with the breathing that you offered earlier, just breathing in peace, breathing out peace, and then being able to do a really clear visualization like that. I'm really grateful that we're able to offer that to people, because it can be, these simple things can be so powerful in shifting things and shifting perception, shifting stories, shifting our reality, shifting our current state of being.
Yes.
Right?
And so much of it isn't about the conscious mind. So if we can access the unconscious, on our behalf, it's kind of a shortcut to experiencing the wonder of forgiveness and letting go.
Yeah.
And it's so yummy that when we want more, and we all deserve more, and we all can have more.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Why don't we just kind of touch on the different areas that we talked about today?
Okay. So, the main point was about the power of stories.
Yeah.
And how we can get stuck in a story of a way we're framing our past, present, or future, ourselves or other people. And part of healing, part of forgiveness, part of resolving conflict is being willing to let go of that stuck story and make room for alternate stories, more benevolent stories, the other person having a different story.
Yeah.
And also recognizing that in any disagreement or problem or a stuck story, we have a contribution and a share without blame. We can look at what we bring to a situation and how we can bring something better. And, if we can breathe through our reactions, we can make space for listening to people, understanding their stories, which makes it a lot easier to forgive them and let go of the resentment. And our hearts will thank us so much when we're able to let go. Yeah. And it is it's a intellectual, practical, spiritual, and emotional journey.
Yes.
And the more of those aspects we can engage and evoke on our behalf, the more the healing can happen.
Right. Thank you for pointing that out. When we can really start bringing all the parts together, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Perfect. So how can people find out more information about you?
Well, I want to invite everyone to visit my website, which has a lot of information about me and what I do, which is www.conflictremedy.com. And I have a lot of articles and, ways to talk to me and all kinds of things like that. And you're so very welcome to visit.
Well, you've been listening to Inspiration and Information with Jen Julius. For more information about me, you can go to jenjulius.com. That's JenJulius. Also on Facebook at facebook.com/JenJuliusCoaching. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a beautiful day. And use some of these tools as you move forward in your day as well. Might as well, right? Do some breathing, do some relaxation, and really take care of yourself.